Coming up on the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast, the man who is singing our song makes a return appearance on the Sarc Fighter podcast, and honestly, life hasn't been so great.
And it would have been around Christmas time that I had my regular set of scans, so the MRI and the PET scan, PET CT, and the inflammation in my heart was way up. So the doctors kind of were pretty nervous about that. My various specialists had a kind of a conference and decided that the best thing was to put me back on medication.
Mark Steier, who wrote and performed the song Zombie, the theme song for this podcast, is back, and this time his wife, Caeleigh, who's helping all of us by running the New York City Marathon and taking care of Mark, is joining him.
Obviously, it's changed our lives in a huge way. It's been a real test of our relationship. I mean, I'm sure folks who listen to your podcast and, maybe they are that support person. It's a tough go. And I don't think, when Mark was originally diagnosed, I had any idea, what that would involve, the emotional, the physical sort of support. Thankfully, it's.
Their story is coming up.
This is the Sarc Fighter podcast. Living with sarcoidosis and other rare diseases. Here's your host, John Carlin.
Hello, this is episode 118 of the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast. I'm your host, John Carlin. This episode brought to you by Atar Pharmaceuticals. To learn more about their new pulmonary sarcoidosis trial called FSOFIT, visit stopsarcoidosis.org/ATIR trial. And as always, there's a link in the show notes. Of course, I do this podcast so you can understand a little bit better about what's going on with you, to kind of figure out what sarcoidosis is all about, and maybe if you're a patient or a caregiver, give you a sense of hope as you deal with this unpredictable disease that seems to find a way to affect all of us and each of us just a little differently. And I think unpredictable is a good way to describe what Mark Steier has been going through. He joined me back in episode 12, and that's when he that was about the time that he emailed me and said, I've written this song, and I just want you to hear it. And we went back and forth, and it became the official song for the podcast, and also it's a bit of a fundraiser for FSR as well. But Mark at that time told me the story of his diagnosis and how it had taken him from playing hardcore recreational hockey to the sidelines, and also, or should I say, in the box, right? If you're playing hockey, but it also hit him as he launched his CPA business and really dealt his life a setback. Well, as it turns out, sarcoidosis wasn't done with him, as it has been persistent, and he is going to share more of that story today. Meanwhile, Caeleigh, his wife and caregiver, is also joining me because she's one of the people selected by FSR to run the New York City Marathon as an official fundraiser for the foundation. She's going to talk about that, as well as how she helps Mark deal with sarcoidosis and how she helps, deal with, her own issues in terms of being married to somebody who's sick all the time. And that's something we have to remember with caregivers. So, but she's handling it very well. It's a very fun interview to listen to. So I think you'll enjoy it. Now, in the previous podcast, episode 117, I shared with you that I was planning to take my own adventure, which was a 400-mile bike ride across New York State from Buffalo to Albany. And for those of you, when you hear New York and you only think of New York City, you have to remember New York State is huge. And when you go east to west, it's also long. and that's what I just experienced firsthand. And it's also beautiful. Upstate Central New York is absolutely gorgeous, and we got to see all of it. So Mary and I rode along the Erie Canal on the Empire Trail, along with about 600 other people. We camped at night. We rode during the day. It was like a riding history lesson, because the Erie Canal changed everybody's life so much in the way that all of a sudden it provided transportation from the Hudson River to the Great Lakes, and in a way that up till that time had been horse and carriage. And now these boats could go back and forth, and they were carrying with them not just goods, but information. And so until trains came along, that was the way that America sort of penetrated into the heartland. So that is the way that the Erie Canal changed the world, and we were learning a lot about how they made the canal and then the impact of the canal. We stopped at all these little trail towns along the way, which many of which are there still today because of the Erie Canal. But it was just really interesting. Now I got to tell you, the heat was a bit of an issue. And then on one day, the remnants of Hurricane Beryl overtook us, and it rained during the night, but not during the day. But then we had a tornado warning, and we sheltered inside the Syracuse Zoo. Everything was fine. There was actually a small tornado. It took out a barn, I think, just outside of Syracuse. We never saw it, never saw any damage or anything like that. But still, you get a warning and you go. The nearest place of any consequence was the Syracuse Zoo. So that's where we went. And if in case you're wondering, yes, my butt was sore and is still sore now, just about a week later. But by and large, it was a fantastic week. I was so pleased with myself for being able to complete the 400 miles, and that was great. But I told you that I would be trying to meet up with fellow Sarc fighter Royce Robertson, who lives not far from Syracuse, and he's been riding this trail in sections as an FSR fundraiser that he calls Cycle for Sarc. It was very successful last year, and now he's back this summer. He's already done one section, and that was earlier this year. And then in August, he'll be tackling a section that I didn't ride, which is where the trail, once you get to Albany, you turn south, and then you can go all the way to New York City. Now, technically, that is not a part. It's part of the Empire Trail system, but it's not the Erie Canal Trail, because the canal stops in Albany. But it is all part of New York State's big thing. Well, we did meet up, and we rode together. We had a beer and some chicken wings the night before, and I talked to Royce about his efforts and his health. Here's a little clip from Royce. Royce, how are you?
I'm doing great today, John. So good to see you. Nice to meet you and Mary in person. This is amazing. This is cool. Really cool.
So we are sitting in your Jeep right now in Syracuse. It is raining cats and dogs. We just had a beer and some chicken wings, and we're talking a little bit about your fight with sarcoidosis, but also about your fundraising efforts, and you still have more fundraising to do this summer. So you're going to ride, like we're in the midst of a ride, Mary and I are now, but you're going to pick up the ride from Albany and go all the way south to New York City?
Yes, from August 6th, 7th, and 8th. We're going to start off outside of Albany and make our way down into the city, stopping in Rhinebeck and Brewster, trying to just enjoy the trip and see as many sites as we can, raise a few dollars to help people that need to travel for treatment with sarcoidosis.
And how are you feeling these days?
I feel great. It's been I'm on my 4th straight PET scan with no new inflammation, no recurring inflammation. Body feels great. I've got a bone scan in September, but all of the steroid-induced osteoporosis is taking its normal course and healing back up. And couldn't ask for a better stretch for me health-wise.
How long did it take you to recover from? You did a fundraising ride earlier this summer, so what's coming up is part 2. How long did it take you to recover from the first leg?
Strangely enough, not much time at all. And I know I told you before that my training for these rides is really not to train at all. So I felt like I won the lottery because I woke up the morning after, my legs felt great. I could easily walk a couple of miles in order to get where I needed to go. I had to get to the train station to take it home. And, it was just a case of like, I just felt like I won the lottery in terms of not feeling my lack of preparation.
Okay, so I'm Mary and I are a little over 200 miles into our ride. We're going all the way across the state, not as a fundraiser. We're just doing it because somebody thought it was a good idea. I don't know why.
All crazy ideas are good ideas.
That's right. But my sit bones are killing me. That didn't happen to you?
It did last year. Last year, I don't know. Maybe it was the amount of rain. Maybe it was my first time, or I'm not sure. But last year I don't mean to sound like, too hyperbolic or anything like that, but I was dying. My rear end was killing me. And it took weeks for the saddle sores to heal. And my legs were sore for days. And I just really don't know what was different or what mattered. Maybe my body passed the threshold and said, "Oh, you can do this. Not a problem." I don't know.
See, I came into this thinking, yeah, I could do this because I ride a lot, as people who listen to the podcast know, and it is not going well for my butt.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you on that one. Sometimes I think it's the seat. Sometimes I think it's the amount of moisture. Sometimes I think it's just mind over matter. I don't know, John. I would say give it a couple weeks and let yourself heal up. But you still got miles to go, so.
Yeah, we're only about halfway to Albany, so we got a few more days in the saddle here. So if somebody wants to donate to you, because you've been through, and we've chronicled your situation a lot with cardiac sarcoidosis. You have been through a lot, and this is you wanting to give back. You want money earmarked for people who have to travel for care because there are just a few really good Sarc centers scattered across the United States. How do people make a donation to your cause, to our cause?
Sure. The easiest way to find me is on Instagram, to look for Cael for Sarc, CYCLE 4 SARC. And if you go to my page on Cael for Sarc, then you'll see a link to the FSR, the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research Rally Bound page, and that's where you can make the donation. If you go to the Instagram page, or even if you get a hold of me through the podcast, you can get my email address. I'd be happy to contact anybody that way, John.
Okay. Royce, thanks a lot for all you're doing.
Oh, absolutely, John. Thank you for being, I said it while we were having dinner, is that the best part about having a rare chronic illness is I've met a bunch of great people as a result of it, and you're one of them. So I really, really appreciate this, and it's awesome to meet you in person.
Yeah, this was really great. I'm glad we were able to link up.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a great ride from here on out, and my best advice to give you at this point is stop at every dollar store between here and Albany and buy some extra towels and washcloths and stuff them down your shorts. It's the only extra padding is your friend at this point.
Got it. Thanks. Bye, Royce.
Bye.
So I have to say that Royce and I have been communicating for a long time. In fact, he found my Cycling with Sarcoidosis blog long before I even knew that there was a Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. And he contacted me back then, and we talked about, maybe someday we could ride our bikes together. Well, and then, of course, now he's been on the podcast, which came long after the blog. He's doing fundraisers, and I've been helping him get the message out and making donations. And then finally, after all these years, we got to ride together. He joined Mary and I and our friends Karen and Greg, and he rode about 20 miles of the trail as we left Syracuse that morning. So seems like a plan is finally coming together. All right. Hey, and I hope you'll support his efforts. It's Cael for Sarc with the number 4 in the middle. That's his KISS account, Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis. And I hope you can take his effort and make it something positive for all of us. And, and Royce has had a tough run of it with cardiac sarcoidosis. So he seemed well and doing well, but let's keep him in our thoughts. Let's thank him for his efforts and help him make all that something positive for FSR. Speaking of that, Coming up, Mark Steier and Caeleigh with their Sarc story here on the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the Sarc Fighter podcast. You may be wondering, what can I do to help? How can I be a part of the sarcoidosis solution? It's simple. Make a donation to KISS, Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis. 100% of the money goes to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. Look for a link in the show notes of the Sarc Fighter podcast. Welcome back to the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast. It is my pleasure today to have back on the podcast Mark Steier, the man behind the lyrics of the music for the podcast, Zombie, and his wife, Caeleigh. Thank you for joining me, guys.
Great to be here.
And so, Mark, first of all, I want to catch up with you. You not only are you a singer, songwriter, musician, and I say your name in every single podcast, but you're a fellow Sarc fighter, and the last couple of years have not been easy for you. Can you just bring listeners up to date on where you are?
Yeah. So the last time we chatted, I believe, was 2020, right after the COVID pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And so I guess anybody that listened to the first episode was, aware that I'm battling cardiac sarcoidosis. And after kind of throughout COVID, I was on a couple of different medications. They started me with Imuran, and prednisone, of course. We've all enjoyed that lovely starting point to our journeys, but unfortunately the Imuran wasn't really successful in taking the inflammation in the heart down. So they ended up getting me on it's technically infliximab, but it's kind of like the biosimilar equivalent of Remicade.
Mm-hmm.
And that worked really, really well for me over the next couple of years. And it worked well enough that in 2022, I guess it would have been fall 2020 or summer 2022, the doctors felt that I was in remission, that all the inflammation was down. So we made the decision to take me entirely off medication, totally. And so that was a really exciting time. Unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be. So I ended up unfortunately contracting a really nasty bug that I'm sure some of the listeners will be familiar with, C. difficile, which is
C. diff, right?
E. diff, exactly.
Yeah.
I was on a run of antibiotics for just like a skin infection, just run-of-the-mill stuff, and I ended up getting this bacterial infection. And I would say that started the absolute darkest period of my journey that I've had to deal with. By the time we were able to get the C. diff infection under control, I had developed post-infectious ulcerative colitis, which I continue to deal with on and off, and the doctors feel will be more than likely kind of a mainstay now. So the bad news there is yet another immune system disease in addition to the sarcoidosis that now I have to kind of deal with. The good news there is Remicade treats both. So
right. That's awesome.
After I had kind of started recovering, I guess it would have been September 2022 where I got the C. diff. I got C. diff. And it would have been around Christmas time that I had my regular set of scans, so the MRI and the PET scan, PET CT, and the inflammation in my heart was way up. So the doctors kind of were pretty nervous about that. My various specialists had a kind of a conference and decided that the best thing was to put me back on medication. So I went back on infliximab at the dose I was at prior to them believing I was in remission, which was every 8 weeks. And so I did that for 6 months. had another set of scans. There was no improvement. So
Hmm.
they upped it to every 6 weeks, I believe. No, they kept it the same. They kept it at every 8 weeks. 6 months later, we did another set of scans, still no improvement. And then they've since about January 2024, so January of this year, it's been every week. So my next set of scans are in a couple of weeks here, kind of mid to late July. And we'll find out at that point if the additional dose has made a dent. So if it does, I assume I'll probably be on infliximab for a goodly long time
Good long
until
time.
something
Yep.
changes.
Yep.
Or if there's if there's no improvement, I'm not sure what the next steps will be. I guess that'll be up to my care team. So hoping for the best, but right now I feel pretty good.
That's what I was going to say is what is, we know what the scans are telling you, but what is just your daily walking around, working level of energy and ability? Where are you with all that?
Yes, I mean, as every Sarc fighter knows, you've got some telltale signs that come up. I think kind of regardless of the type of sarcoidosis that you're battling, when you're, sarcoidosis, like most kind of immune system diseases, and I think that's, even though we don't know for sure that's what it is, that's kind of how it's classified and how it's treated. It kicks you when you're down, right? It's one of those diseases where when things are going good and you're taking care of yourself and your stress levels are under control, you can still feel pretty good. But the second you let, stress, anxiety, mental health, those sorts of things slip, that's when the disease really likes to give you a kick in the rear. So you get the telltale signs, right? The achy forearms, the achy joints, the fatigue, for me, I'll get, with cardiac sarcoidosis, I'll get the kind of the heart palpitations. I'm one of the people that can feel when my pacemaker is doing its thing. Not every time, but if I'm really focusing on it or I have anxiety about it, I can kind of tell when it's kicking on and off, because you get that little bit of a like a delay, or like you could feel the correction
Really?
taking place. Yeah. Some people can, some people can't. But it's so some of those, mostly it's fatigue, achiness, right? Those sorts of things that really start kind of kicking in.
Got
And
it.
for
Yeah.
me, I find that that's my body telling me that you need to make some changes, and whether that's eating better, dialing down the stress, which of course, depending on the cause of the stress, isn't always immediately possible. um you kind of just have to listen and try to make changes in the right direction when your body's giving you those signs.
Yeah, which isn't always easy to do, especially if it's work-related stress, because most of us have to work, um, and that's another thing. I want to come back to that, but um, we introduced Caeleigh at the beginning of the show, and Caeleigh, you first of all are the caregiver for all of this, right? I'm assuming. So thank you. How is that going? What's it like to take care of that guy?
Oh man, it's a roller coaster. I mean, I wouldn't obviously it's changed our lives in a huge way. It's been a real test of our relationship. I mean, I'm sure folks who listen to your podcast and maybe they are that support person, it's a tough go. And I don't think when Mark was originally diagnosed, um I had any idea what that would involve, the emotional, the physical sort of support. Thankfully, it's been amazing, even just listening to Mark rattle all of that off. It's been absolutely amazing watching the kind of advocacy and grit and tenacity that he's put into not only his care, which I'm very grateful for, because as I love him to pieces, but I'm a bit of a scatterbrain when it comes to managing appointments and all of these things. So it's been amazing just kind of watching and also really challenging, of course, trying to help in whatever way I can, and also through friends and family. But Mark navigating our healthcare system and working with a team of individuals who have provided amazing care over the years. Those doctors and specialists are a rock, but yeah, it's been really challenging, and but at the same time, I'm so proud of him, and where we've gotten to, and I think we've grown a lot through all of this. It's one of those things it tests a lot of who you are and everything, but it's also been surprising. I mean, I find I'm not necessarily by default the most optimistic person, or at least I haven't always. I definitely struggle with, depression, anxiety, all that sort of stuff. But through this, I've really found my role, and maybe it's just, trying to keep my sanity through it, but it's just never, ever considering the worst case scenarios. I mean, I think there's enough worrying that happens from, a rheumatoid arthritis perspective. We've got a lot of folks who are just, they're focused on that. So I think my role has really been to try to uplift Mark wherever possible, and really try to be that support and that rock. Which of course, like you said, whether it's work stress, whether it's other kind of stress, I've got my own stuff to deal with, of course, but
Sure.
Yeah. So.
And when Caeleigh says rheumatoid arthritis, she means rheumatologist.
Yes.
My rheumatologist
right.
is a real worrywart. She
what
stresses us out quite a bit.
Yeah. It's good to have somebody worrying about you, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Look for what to worry about.
Right. Nothing worse than going to see the doctor and they walk in the room and they say, "Good morning," and they have no idea what's going on with you. And they sit down at the computer and they call it up and they say, "Oh, yes, of course, you're the sarcoidosis patient." It's like, well, how are you feeling? Yeah, I'd rather have a doctor who's worried about me than
Agreed.
the opposite.
Agreed. Yeah. Her line is her go-to line, and she's lovely. If she ever listens to this, love you to pieces. Don't leave me. But her line is, "We just don't know. There's no playbook for this."
Right.
So
right.
it's, we have to, as a medical team, we have to kind of figure this out, and we have to react. There's no textbook that covers how to deal with this situation. Is kind of her go-to thing, which is very honest and true, but also a little bit stressful sometimes.
Yeah. Well, so Caeleigh, I want to ask you, because you are a marathon runner and you have turned that energy into some fundraising. So, first of all, let's talk a little bit about your running. You have done a couple of marathons so far. Is that correct, in Canada?
That is correct. Yeah. I was just looking back at my my track record before this episode and just trying to remember sort of, okay, where did it all start? Yeah, I've run a few, and I actually really enjoy the half marathon distance, but the full marathon is, it's a brutal challenge, but I do love it. So yeah, I started running seriously, I guess. I signed up for a half marathon clinic here in Edmonton through the Running Room, which is a really well-established local business. And they've, been sort of a pillar of the running community, local to here and throughout Canada, but they do these really amazing clinics. And through that, shout out to the Collingwood crew, if anyone's listening. I met some amazing people and really went from running on and off. I'd pick it up, put it down every few years whenever I sort of got the bug, to really having that accountability network, and just, running with 20 odd people in Edmonton winters, training my first ever half. Yeah, I get that a lot.
Yeah.
My first half marathon was actually the hypothermic half, which is run in February, I believe, in Edmonton, which is thankfully it was a fairly mild winter, but I look back on that and think, my goodness, what a race to start with. But from there, I was locked in. I met such amazing people. And from there, it was just kind of, they became my community, my support. And it's just, I've truly enjoyed that. And, fast forward to, that was right before the pandemic, and through the pandemic, of course, we were all sort of told to keep any kind of contact with people either outdoors or avoid it. So running was perfect. You could run alongside someone, keep your distance, as it were, and but still have that sense of connection. And then also, I mean, I referenced my own sort of mental health challenges, but I've found running is the best drug for me. Physical activity, being outside, being with people, and just sharing that experience has been better than any prescription medication I've ever tried. So that really got me through, I would say, the pandemic. And I'm so fortunate for that. And then in 2021, I think it was, so a couple of friends of mine, this, kind of local legend of the running community, Steve Leakey, and a good friend of mine, Aaron Fauser. Aaron and I had never run a full marathon before. And because all of these major races across the world were being shut down and, having to either move virtually or postpone, the opportunity to run the virtual Boston Marathon virtually from wherever you are in the world became available. And, Steve and Aaron and I were just like, well, shoot, like, let's just do that. So that was my first ever full marathon.
But you ran it in Canada.
In Edmonton, yes.
Yeah, okay.
I've got the unicorn medal, and they sent out a package and all that sort of stuff, but we had to make our own route and figure out support and everything. And actually that's where Mark came in, and my dad. Sidebar, my dad actually has pulmonary sarcoidosis. So kind of an interesting connection there too. But my dad and Mark, they were on their bikes and they were following us throughout the course, which is just in our beautiful Edmonton River Valley in the fall. So it was a little chilly and rainy that day. But they had, they're slinging water bottles, they had backup,
Advil.
Man, did I ever need it? That was a really rough first race. I had so many issues with my feet and blisters and stuff, and my shoes didn't work out. So lots of lessons learned, but it was such an amazing experience. I mean, just to sort of finish that. And I think a lot harder, actually, having done a few. I've run Calgary, I've run Vancouver, and now New York is on the horizon. But, running that, and for the most part, I was running it by myself, like even with Mark and my dad sort of tootling along and helping me out. I don't tend to run with music. It was just me and the road, and it was long and it was hard. So running in a situation where you've got other runners and you've got people cheering for you and volunteers at aid stations was such a novel and wonderful experience.
Really, doesn't that make a difference? Do you put your name on your shirt so people can see your name so they can say, "Go Caeleigh" when you run by? Have you done that?
Yes, absolutely.
It works.
It does. It's such a boost. Yeah. If anyone listening is at all interested in sort of, being that person on the side of the road for a major race or whatever, just scream real loud. And the name thing works. If you're like, hey, like John, like go, like,
right.
You never know where that athlete might be in their race. They might be just absolutely crumbling. And just to hear that positive enforcement from, a complete stranger, it's the magical thing. And it
really helps.
Yeah.
All right. So now we've established that you've got two sarcoidosis patients basically in your life, your husband and your dad. You're a runner, and you have received one of the Foundation for Sarcoidosis research spots in the New York Marathon, right? So
Yeah.
first of all, you had to compete with other people to say, I'm the most worthy. And then you had to agree, because I was one of the judges. So I saw a lot of the applications. You probably didn't know that, but I
I
was. Um, but so you had to say, look, this is my attachment to sarcoidosis, and this is what I'm willing to do. And therefore you should choose me to be the person that runs. I mean, you had to compete, right? And you did. So you got chosen. Congratulations.
thank you.
But you've got a fundraising portion that comes with that responsibility. So how is that going? What are you doing? Tell us all about it.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, that's amazing. I didn't realize that you were part of that process, but that makes this whole conversation even more special.
Yeah, thanks,
Uh-huh.
John. That's an
Yeah.
expensive. That's an expensive selection. No. Just before we get into that,
Yeah, you're gonna love it. You're just gonna love paying for all the hotel rooms in New York.
oh God,
Yeah.
quick question. I don't know if you can share this, but just approximately, how many applications came in, or like just approximately?
You know what? I don't know if by the time it got to me, if there were, if it had already been pared down, because I'm on the patient advisory committee. And so that's that and the podcast. And so and maybe they just know I'm a runner. I don't know, but I got to vote. I would say that I was looking at 10 to 15 applications for, I think it was 5 spots, wasn't it? It's been a while.
Yeah.
So I think it's 5. So, and everybody has got a great story to tell. They're all worthy, but I just thought that Caeleig's application stood out. So yeah, I can tell you that, I think we had to choose 5, and I can't remember if we ranked them or didn't rank them. I'm sorry. I don't have more top of mind on that. But it stood out. So, I loved your letter and all of that. And so that's, I'm glad that you were chosen. But so how much is it? $3,500 that you're raising?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. And how are you doing that?
So far, I would say, this podcast is really, I'm considering kind of the kickoff to the fundraising in earnest. So far it's been just kind of, sharing my fundraising page, which we'll obviously share with you as well, to friends and family. But I'm not actually all that active on social media, but just, this is obviously this is a special circumstance. So really ramping that up, connecting with my colleagues. And I know, with Mark as well, with his accounting firm and his business connections, I think there's some opportunities there too, especially since a lot of his clients are doctors. So I think they get what we're trying to do here. So
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
working with my clients, I do typically specialize in working with medical professionals. So I mean, specialists, family doctors, ER docs, you name it. But that's kind of my area of practice that I really focus on. And one of the things that any of my clients would tell you is I'm very, very transparent about my journey, whether it's the mental health aspect, which is something I'd like to touch on before the end of this podcast, because I think it's important, but we'll come back to that, or just the medical side of things. And I've had a lot of clients that are just so interested and so supportive, and they'll even reach out to me and say, how are you doing, which is incredible, because these people are just massively busy. They're overworked. They're it's a lot of stress being a medical professional, and that means a lot. So a lot of the people that I work with professionally are very aware of my journey and are aware of the challenges, and take an interest. So that's without crossing any professional boundaries or any professional lines, that's one area that I'm going to look into, like sharing this podcast and saying, hey, this is something that's coming up, and if you're interested in supporting it, that's great. No pressure by any means, or anything like that. But There is a lot of people in my professional network that are genuinely interested in this and in rare diseases and supporting these kind of causes. And it's it's going to be kind of exciting to share that with them.
That's awesome. And it's nice to have access to people who have means to support you. I mean, that makes a difference. Years and years and years ago, when I started marathoning, I was raising money for the Leukemia Society and working with their team and training program, which was wonderful. But I convinced my mother to give me her address book. And so all of a sudden, all of the people that I knew who were my parents' friends when I was growing up, who lived all over the United States and hadn't seen me in 20 years, were getting letters from me saying, please support my my effort here to raise money. And it worked. I think we were raising a similar amount of money back then. So I wish you all the best with that. So have you set up a KISS account, or do you have a separate fundraising page? How, if people want to give you money, where do they go to do that?
Yeah. So I know Mark has, that's the KISS account.
The Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis account, right?
Yeah, you have one as well.
I do. So as a member of Team Rally for Sarc through FSR, I did create my own fundraising page, and you had to create a team to do that. So it's Team Sarc Mark.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So all of the funds are being raised over there. I don't have the URL off the top of my head.
I'll email it to you.
No,
Yeah.
well, yeah, no, you can email it to me, but basically,
Yeah.
so you're gonna do it through the FSR fundraising page, which
Yeah.
listeners of this podcast are familiar with. They've contributed to Mark as the singer-songwriter for the title song for the podcast. And so Mark, you've gotten some bumps here and there along the way, right? People have found you and made a contribution.
Yeah, going back to the song, I think that's, yeah, every once in a while I get surprised by, an email inbox message, and it's just like, anonymous or so and so, somebody that I've, never met or I'm not familiar with the name, has donated to your, your KISS account, and people have left some really wonderful messages. I can think of one example. I think it was like $250 that somebody left, and they just said that the song, was really really impacted them, and has made some sort of small difference, and that's the most amazing thing as a musician that you can possibly hear. Like, I'm not a famous musician by any stretch of the imagination, and you hear music interviews where the musicians are like, well, we get letters from people and it's so cool, and but to be able to experience that, have somebody reach out and say, hey, I'm going through something similar to what you're going through, and your song was super meaningful to me, and even if it just helped somebody have a good cry, like, that's an unbelievable gift to be able to give. And people have reached out via Facebook, and the KISS the KISS page, and via email through you. I think of the one gentleman, I believe, from Scotland, whose daughter was doing a college, like a bachelor
Art
of
show.
arts.
Mhm.
Yeah, and she did an art show, Breathless, I think it was called, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And it's been on my to-do list. I didn't know when it was supposed to happen, but it's been on my to-do list to reach out and see if I can get some pictures or see how it went. But just asking for permission to use that song as part of her gallery, or her, I guess, installation. That's the word I was looking for. Like, that's so cool, and it's just, none of the money goes to us. None of the money goes to towards anything. It goes directly to the FSR and the great
Right.
work that they're doing, and just to be able to support that in a small way is super meaningful to me.
I don't know if you know, but FSR graciously gave me an award last year at their annual gala. And so when they called me up, I had asked them, I knew in advance, I said, you have to play Zombie. So
Oh,
as I'm walking through and I'm walking up to the microphone, it's like I feel like a zombie. It's like so that was like my theme music when I came up to bat.
oh,
So
that's so cool.
yeah, I still have this vision in my head that at some point there will be another event or whatever, and we're in a convention hall, and all of us Sarc fighters are there, and you're there, and you're playing, you and the band are playing the song, and we're talking about it, and I just think that the audience would love that, and if that opportunity ever came to pass, that'd be a dream come true for me, actually.
I'd be there in a heartbeat, John. Just let me
Yeah.
know.
Okay. All right. Well, that's cool. All right. So now I want to get back, Mark, to you because you were dealing with the stress and it was causing you all these different things. And you went through a pretty significant bout of depression, which you've shared with me. Can you talk a little bit more about that, how you dealt with that and how you sort of started to come out the other side?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a long twisting tale. And I'm gonna try to I'll try to kind of get through it in a reasonably quick period here. But um, the I think as a lot of people that deal with sarcoidosis or any physical ailment, right? Like any disease, any uh, ongoing illness, um, it really takes a toll on your mental health. Um, it's really tough to see your peers, being younger. I was 30 when I was diagnosed, right? Um, and it took a lot of things away from me, right? It took the ability to play hockey away. It took away a lot of my fitness. The prednisone caused me to gain a lot of weight. Um, and then you go from a diagnosis in February of 2019 and being hospitalized and being put on prednisone and having to navigate this new reality immediately into a pandemic where you're told that you're a high risk individual. And that was very, very punishing for me, because I had a lot of fear, and I don't want to get into the politics of the pandemic, obviously. There was things in Canada that were done right, and there was things that were done wrong, and that's okay. I think the safer approach was the right way, but the safer approach caused a lot of isolation and fear in a lot of people. And myself personally, I took the pandemic very, very seriously and had a lot of fear surrounding it. So I became very, very isolated. It took away, hockey was already kind of taken away from me, and then the pandemic took away my band, right? My band members, they had kids. Unfortunately, one of their children, was born very premature and is dealing with some real serious developmental issues. So the music kind of stopped, while they dealt with their new reality and some of the challenges, blessings and challenges, as any parent I'm sure knows, in their life. And my parents are massive, massive support for me, and being isolated from them and being afraid, and my dad and my brother were definitely a little bit more loosey goosey with the rules. They were in the service industry. They were running a plumbing and heating company at the time. So they were still interacting with a lot of people and suppliers and technicians and stuff like that. And it was just terrifying for me to see them. So being really isolated from my primary support network, had a real big challenge on my mental health as well. And then of course in 2020, towards the end of 2021, early 2022, when things started opening up again, I won't say returning to normal, but reopening, and the vaccines rolled out. I had a brief period of like, okay, this is something that I can, do again. And it was great for a while. And then contracting C. diff and starting that whole flare up and everything again was extremely punishing. And one of the things that through all of this, I mean, 1 month before I was diagnosed, or I guess 2 months before I was diagnosed and hospitalized, I had left my job to start my own accounting firm with my business partner. So through all this, we're trying to build a business. And, as anybody that's been an entrepreneur knows, building a business is very stressful. It's very hard work. It's a lot of hours, and a lot of uncertainty. And I will give my business partner a lot of props, through our ups and downs. He's always been very, very supportive, and you know, uh, just never questioned or criticized my health, and the challenges that I've experienced relating to that. So I have been lucky in that regard. But ultimately, all of those things put together resulted in me entering a pretty severe depression last year. And one of the major things for me that I've really struggled with from a mental health perspective is illness anxiety. And so that really came to the forefront and was a major day-to-day challenge, because I think when you're diagnosed with something like that, I mean, my mom always said I was a little bit of a hypochondriac, as a kid. And it's being a little bit weird is part of being a musician and a goaltender and an accountant. You've got to be a little bit weird to do those things. And
That's a rare combination, by the way,
yeah,
of things.
yeah.
Goaltender, accountant, and musician. Don't
Actually,
hear that
know
very
what?
often.
A
Huh?
lot of goaltenders are musicians, especially drummers.
Okay, but
It's a
how many
thing.
accountants are?
Not very many. Not very
Yeah.
many. So maybe that's why I'm a bad musician, or maybe it's because maybe I'm a bad accountant because I'm a musician. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay. All right. All right. All right.
Um,
Doing
but
silly.
but anyway, so like when most people get a tickle in their throat, or they get a cough, or they have stomach problems, yeah, I'm getting sick, whatever. I'll take a Pepto, I'll move on, whatever, right? But I think for a lot of people, once you've kind of been through a worst case scenario where, for years and years and years, I was told, well, not years and years and years, but 16 to 18 months, I was told, you're out of shape. You just have exercise induced asthma. Here's a puffer, right? Um, you know, After kind of like, oh, okay, actually, this is a super rare disease. And oh, actually, you could have died. And oh, actually, you're going to be dealing with this for the rest of your life. And it's a really serious thing. And we have to put you in all these crazy medications. Something kind of clicked. We're like, now, every time I got a scratchy throat or tummy trouble or a cough or whatever, it's not, I'm getting a cold, or like, I'll take a Pepto-Bismol. It was like
It's a
going down
flare.
the rabbit hole, Googling, WebMD, spinning, obsessive thoughts, worrying, right? Like all of those things that kind of come with anxiety. And for me, it was really, really centered around health. And, is this my sarcoidosis flaring up? Is this cancer? Is that like
Mhm.
all these worst case scenarios? And it sounds so ridiculous to say out loud. You know what I mean? But I think a lot of people really silently deal with this kind of, especially people with chronic illness, really silently deal with these sort of thoughts. And whether it's diagnosed or not, it's real. It feels real. It feels scary in the moment.
Yeah, people listening to this are nodding their heads right along with you. I guarantee it.
Yeah,
I guarantee it, because it's always when something goes wrong, the first thing you think of is it's a flare or it's something to do with sarcoidosis. And until a doctor says, "No, what? You actually just have a cold." Okay. But you get scared to death. It's like the next gotcha waiting around every corner.
exactly. Um, I couldn't have put it better myself. um, and that started causing a lot of real problems for me, right? Like that's from Caeleigh's perspective as a caregiver, that's a nightmare. It's a roller coaster.
It is.
What version of Mark is going to wake up today? Is it going to be the happy, optimistic, ambitious Mark, or is it going to be the absolutely paralyzed, fearful, stuck in his own head kind of Mark? You know what I mean? And when the depression really started hitting me, I had tried antidepressants in the past for other reasons and had a bit of a bad experience. and just kind of swore them off and was like, I'm never going to do that again. And I made the mistake of, I worked with counselors and I worked with psychologists, on and off, which is helpful. But I think at a certain point, you need additional assistance that talk therapy just can't provide. I think talk therapy is a really important part of a bigger treatment picture when it comes to mental health. And I'm currently working with a counselor, therapist, psychologist, whatever the term, the preferred term is, and that's been helpful. But in and itself, it wasn't enough to get those mental health challenges under control. And finally, and as every accountant out there knows, and if you work with an accountant, you might notice they're very, very grumpy in the first 4 months of the year. It's extremely, extremely stressful, lots of deadlines, lots of clients. It's a very difficult profession. It's great in the summer,
Right.
but for the first
But
4 months of the year,
tax time is terrible.
tax time is terrible.
Yeah,
And
my wife's an accountant, so I get it.
okay, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and this year broke me. It just, because I was in the depths of depression. It was a particularly challenging tax year because of some legislative changes here in Canada, which made everything very, very chaotic. And we had, one of our staff members had some real challenges in her personal life as far as, tragedy in the family, stuff like that. And it was just a colossally stressful tax season, and it defeated me. I made it through, but I went to the doctor in April, and I sat in that waiting room and I was just sobbing. And he said, Mark, like, you have to get this stress under control. You have to make some changes. And so I worked with my business partner. I'm going to make some professional changes moving forward that involve me stepping back and doing a bit less. And there's consequences to that, but that's, I'd rather be alive and happy than dead and rich, than have a big estate. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not what I value. And so I've started making those changes, and got a lot of support from the staff, from my partner, from my family. And that's been helpful, having kind of a light at the end of the tunnel that, like, this is something I'm working towards. This is something that I can do. And also I've started working with my doctor. Like he said in that appointment, he just said that, and now I'm seeing him here in an hour, as a 6-week follow-up. But he said, like, we're not going to do anything during tax season, just survive, just get there. You've got another week or 2 weeks or whatever it is left to go. And then after, let's talk about some medication and see if we can, get this leveled out. And so that's kind of been my journey, and the medication, obviously has had some side effects. It's been a bit of anybody that's been on antidepressants knows the first month can be a little bit rough with, numerous strange side effects. But I feel like it's starting to work. It's starting to help, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm feeling optimistic about the future. And so, I mean, like, that's been my journey, but it's been an interesting, and I think the metaphor, going back to Caeleigh's running, I think the metaphor here is so apt, because when Caeleigh was running her first marathon, she was by herself. It hurts. You've never done it before. You're pushing yourself further than you've ever pushed, in your life. You're alone. You don't have the cheerleaders. You don't have the other runners. You don't have the pace bunnies. You don't have any of those things, right? You don't even have the big shiny finish line with the music and the medals. It's just, you're on your own and you're gritting through. And yeah, me and her dad were support, but we weren't riding behind her telling her how great of a job we were doing. We were giving her water and then cycling as fast as we could 1 kilometer up the road to give her water again. That's, she showed just an immense amount of grit to be able to do that. And of course, like with the digital marathon, you have to provide proof that you did it,
Sure.
right? So because it was raining, her Apple Watch paused and she didn't realize it. So she actually had to do an extra, what was it, 2 kilometers ish, 1.8 or something like that. Yeah. At the end, after she thought she was done, because of course we had measured out the route and everything, right? She had to do an extra kilometer to make up for the part of the race where her Apple Watch inadvertently paused, which was a nice surprise. And you know, she was just like running in circles through this neighborhood. We were all cheering her on and everything. But I feel like that's kind of a great metaphor for having for having a disease like sarcoidosis.
Right.
You know, yes, you have your support systems, and yes, you have your cheerleaders, and you have your doctors, and every once in a while, every kilometer, every 2 kilometers, somebody's there to help you with your meds or give you a positive message or whatever, right? But the vast majority of it, for a lot of people, myself included, and not to the fault of that support system, just the reality of life, you're gritting that out in your head on your own. And that, and nobody really truly understands. The vast majority of people really truly understand what you're going through, because it's not something that the people really understand. It's a rare disease. And so many of the symptoms of sarcoidosis is like, I don't feel well. But that's it. It's so hard to explain. All you know is you feel terrible in a just vague, difficult to communicate way.
Yeah.
And I think for somebody that hasn't experienced that, it's so difficult for them to be like, okay, how do I support you through this? How do I help? Right.
And they don't, a lot of times people think you're making it up or, I mean, I think people are mostly sympathetic, but, and maybe Caeleigh, you could speak to this, but it's, well, like what Mark said, when I wake up, which version of John is it going to be? Is it going to be the grumpy John, or is it going to be the happy-go-lucky John? And that's, I mean, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. That, I think, if I was to boil it down as far as our day-to-day life together, I would say that's probably our biggest challenge. I'm very, very, very fortunate in that I, knock on wood, I don't have any major health stuff to worry about. Like I'm fit, I'm healthy. I mean, living with Mark and going through all this, I've really learned not to take that for granted. So when I do have, sniffles or, a stomach bug or something, I'm like, okay, just appreciate the next time you go out for a run or, get on your bike, because it's, just having the strength, having the mobility and general sort of fitness to do that. But that's, my perspective. Applying that to, as you say, Sarc is such a weird, undefinable kind of thing. Like I didn't really know much at all about what a chronic autoimmune situation would look like. That lived experience certainly wasn't there. And to this day, when Mark's talking about that solo kind of gritting through it kind of experience, there is still obviously that barrier. I can't, in any real way, I can be as compassionate, empathetic as I want to be, but I don't know what he's going through. And it really is just kind of that communication piece is so important. But yeah, it's really tough. When I'm thinking about myself and how I wake up in the morning and how I sort of assess how I'm feeling, if I've got a scratchy throat, it really is sort of the former, not the latter, where I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe I didn't drink enough water yesterday, or maybe I'm getting a cold. So I am really that quote unquote normal person who doesn't really have that really dark, nefarious kind of side, that undertone to all of those kind of pretty benign symptoms. So, when I have had to negotiate that and navigate that with Mark, I think early on, it was more, okay, no, like, it's not that bad. like, or let's just give it some time. Like, okay, like maybe book in with your doctor. Like, let's see how this goes. But in the back of my head, it was kind of like, well, there's no way this is actually as serious as, and it's not saying it like that, it was this constant, like, I don't want to be dismissive. I want to be supportive, but finding that balance between taking these concerns very, very seriously, even though they present as very minor in that moment, realizing that you don't actually know how serious something could potentially get. And in the case of, C. diff, I think that was the worst. Like, it really exposed how something that could be so, you could write it off as, oh, you
Got a bug.
You got a bug. What that bug is when you've got Sarc.
Right.
Totally different conversation. So I think now it's taken a lot of work, and I'm certainly not, I would never say I'm perfect at this by any means, but I think we've sort of gotten to a point where I can listen a lot better than I could at the beginning, and at least acknowledge that concern, and that there's physical, there's mental impacts to all of this, and to be able to know when I need to just back down the anxiety, and I need to be that person who's a little bit dismissive and says, no, we're just going to go for a walk. We're going to, get your head out of this state, and then we'll circle back to this. We'll see if this is just as scary as you thought it was, or maybe this is just an anxiety spiral, which, I'm very familiar with as well. So it's like, okay, do we need to remove ourselves from the situation? Maybe that's step number one. And if it's still there, like, okay, what do we need to do? It's really kind of walking through that decision tree of what kind of support is required at any given point. And, hopefully the message through all of that is really, I love you and I care and I'm here, even if I don't understand.
Yeah.
Right. So it's tough. It is tough.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand. And because it just doesn't seem natural for the person that to be in such a funk and stay in such a funk. And, but on the other hand, speaking from experience and someone who does take an antidepressant, I know that sometimes that state of mind just arrives, and you're just waiting for the day where you wake up and you don't feel like that. It's awful. It's just awful. So, all right. So Caeleigh, I want to ask you, the New York Marathon is in November. So you've got some time before you need to start ramping up your miles. But one of the hard things about a fall marathon is you have to do that. You have to do some long runs in the heat of the summer in order to prepare, because you need, a month out, you need to be running close to 20 miles in your training runs.
Yep, that's right.
If I recall from when I was training. So have you started any of that yet? Or are you just kind of doing your daily milers or your weekly miles, and you're going to start ramping up?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I've traditionally opted for a pretty quick 12-week training cycle.
Okay.
The marathons I've trained for in the past, I think most of them sort of err on that 16-week side. So, that's significant amount of time, but this time round, and you're absolutely right. That's one of the deadly things about fall marathons is the heat. And, the last few years in Canada where we live, there's been real air quality issues, like some wildfires, smoke.
Right. Yeah.
That's also been a huge factor, and, definitely driven me inside on a few occasions. And, so thankfully that hasn't been the case so far. It's been a pretty cool, rainy spring and summer, to start. But yeah, for right now, I'm really just kind of focused on getting my legs back under me. It's, I can't remember if Mark mentioned, but I started a new job last year in October. I'm now at the U of A library. It's amazing. There's been a lot of shifts that have come along with that. a lot of changes, scheduling being one of them. So trying to adapt and find time, make time really to pursue this thing that I love and that I know is really valuable, has been a challenge. I also try to bike commute as often as I can. So there's just a lot going on there. So working in the logistics of my regular, I try to get out at least twice a week, long run on Sunday, sort of 8 to 10K over the course of the week minimum. And looking at, okay, well, how do I fit in a marathon trip, which I'm sure, as is a next level kind of endeavor. It really is. So, and I have kind of worked through some injuries in the past, and I'm really, my goal here is with New York is really to focus on the mobility and sort of the prehab side of things as well, and doing that strength training piece, incorporating all of that as I go, which of course is really important and requires more additional time and all that sort of stuff. So, just looking at, I've looked at a couple of different training programs, some that are a little bit more focused, just because I don't have the luxury of an ultimately flexible schedule. I do want to make sure that all my runs count and that kind of thing. So that's where I'm at. I definitely, I think I want to try to have something really locked in as far as a plan by mid-July.
Okay. Yeah, that works. And I would rather go into a marathon undertrained than overtrained.
Yes.
Honestly, I ran several when I had knee issues or something that was a result of running too much or training too hard. And then by the time I got to the event, I was just absolutely miserable. And all that training just made it worse, not better.
Yeah.
And especially if you're going to New York, enjoy it.
Yeah.
Just go and don't try and run for a PR or anything like that. Just go and soak it all in, enjoy the atmosphere, be there with the 40,000 people. And, I mean, it's just a thing, just do the event. If you walk some of it, so what,
Oh.
So I mean, you didn't ask me for any advice, but that's what it is. But the point is, people, if you're listening, look, what Caeleigh is going through is significant. It is significant. And so the effort that she is going through to do this on behalf of FSR and for her own sense of personal accomplishment, you can't separate that. But look, you're doing all the hard work, Caeleigh. And what people need to do is they need to step up and support you as a caregiver, as the wife of the man who wrote the song for the voice of sarcoidosis. I mean, if there's somebody to support in all of this, it's you, and I think people should do it.
Thank you, John. That's very kind. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, guys, listen, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it, Mark. I know you've got to get to a doctor's appointment, but thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, John, thanks for having me back. And it's always a pleasure chatting and getting the word out there, and keep doing the good work that you're doing. It's appreciated.
Thanks so much, John.
Yep. Thank you.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
So thanks to Mark for sharing his story. Of course, I wish him all the best as he continues to battle the disease. And of course, Caeleigh, I got to tell you, she's got a long summer of marathon training to do if she's going to compete in the New York City Marathon in November. Let me tell you, if you've never trained to run 26.2 miles, that is not easy. And the thing is for a fall marathon, you do the bulk of that training in the summer. So you're doing like a 20-mile training run in September, an 18-mile training run maybe in early September or late August, and it's just hot out there. And I can remember getting up at 4 a.m. to start running so I could get most of the miles in before the sun came out and got too hot. So what she's doing is not Nothing. I mean, this is going to be a lot. All right. So let's take her effort and make it worthwhile and send her a few bucks, would you? And don't forget about Royce. He's out there riding his bike doing that, and he's got the cardiac sarcoidosis and, so much going on with him as we've discussed. So let's help these folks out and help our common cause all at the same time. And I'm glad that here on the podcast, I can help spread the word. So let's make it all work, folks. All right, here we go. Well, the official Sarc Fighter song is called Zombie by Mark Steier and his band, the White Hot Lizards. And I'm going to play the whole song at the end of this podcast. I don't always, but this time I think it's appropriate. And you've heard Mark's story right here on this podcast. Remember, I release this podcast every other Monday. As I'm speaking today, my trusty dog Dougal has abandoned my office because my wife Mary is home watching TV. And of course, he always goes wherever she is. He's cheating on me, but he's on the couch watching TV with Mary. So Dougal is not in my office today. The backstory to the founding of the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research is episode 11 with Andrea and Redding Wilson. Don't forget to follow the Sarc Fighter on Facebook, Instagram, Peloton, and my cycling blog, Carl and the Cyclist. Also, if you're new here and you're trying to figure out what Sarc is, go back and listen to episode 2 with Dr. Simon Hart, and my story is episode 1. If you'd like to contact me, send me an email, carlinagency@gmail.com, and there's a link in the show notes. Until next time, keep fighting.
It would be so much easier to grieve if I had a breath to breathe. I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling. Learn to suffer, you feel pain someday. Learn endurance, your strength will fade away. Dead man walking, trying to keep up the pace. Dead man walking, counting down his days. And I don't know what will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. There was potential, slipping gone. It feels torrential, but I'm holding on. I'm holding on. I'm holding on. The fear I fight every single night. Whoa, I'm still upright. Find a way to try and adapt your life. It's not the why, but the how that plagues my mind. A new perspective, appreciate what you've got. We're dead men walking, in an instant it could be gone. And I don't know what will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. There was potential, slipping gone. It feels torrential, but I'm holding on. I'm holding on. I'm holding on. The fear I fight every single night. Whoa, I'm still upright. Wherever there is happiness, fight to be there too. And wherever there are friendly smiles, try hard to smile too. And wherever there is sunshine, let fear darken you. And whatever happens, please remember right now belongs to you. What